All right. Good morning, everybody, and welcome. We're so thankful to have you here with us today. Uh, my name is Ross Godfrey, and I'm an executive leadership coach with San Diego County Office of Ed. I am a recovering high school principal and proud of that, and did a lot of work when the dashboard first came out. And Fortunately, I have the opportunity to work with administrators across San Diego County. And one of the areas we talk about frequently is both A through G completion and obviously college and career readiness. So I'm happy to be co-presenting today with my partner, which I'll let her introduce herself now.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jewel Alderson Clark, and I am on the College and Career Readiness Division in the Innovation Division at the County Office of Education. And I support career readiness and innovation initiatives throughout the region, mostly focused on career technical education. But my background is I taught chemistry and medical chemistry back in the classroom. And so I'm very passionate about making learning really relevant, which is one of the reasons I'm very excited about the CCI, because we are really looking at more meaningful ways to give students both a college and career ready perspective. Excellent. We're very excited to see you here, and I will continue to add that slides link into the chat so you can find it there as we proceed through. On we go.
All right. So one of the things we really hopefully you understand is that we want to acknowledge that we are in the face of a pandemic, and we know that things have been very difficult for many people. And sometimes talking about college and career indicators is a little bit abstract right now, but we really want to make sure you guys have the tools to provide you with the best and most current information possible. And keep in mind, one of the main reasons we do this is at the county, we've made a commitment towards making equitable outcomes for all students. And we used to use different graphics. If you've been to any county trainings, you used to see the ones where the kids were standing on the boxes. Then we used the one where kids were on the bikes. But just recently, a colleague of mine presented this to me, and I really like this analogy of looking at the planter boxes and thinking that, you know, each child in order to flourish needs to be able to get what they need and deserve in a timely manner to reach that full potential. And much like plants, right? Not all plants need as much water. Not all plants need the same amount of sunlight. And so if we want those plants to flourish like our students, we need to be able to understand them, get to know them, and be able to find ways to meet their full potential. And so to help them reach their full potential. So we just always want to ground our work in equity and make sure that you do too, right? Because at the end of the day, Dr. Gothold, when he kicked this off yesterday, famously says this all the time, and I love that he reiterated it. We want all kids to be able to be college and career ready. Whether they go to college or not should be their choice, but we want to make sure that they do that. Thanks, Vanessa. A colleague of mine brought that up. I appreciate the feedback. So one of the things we're going to talk about today is actually the dashboard. We're going to do an overview of the California dashboard, and then hopefully at the end of the session here, we're going to actually get you guys into the dashboard, and Jewel came up with a little cheat sheet so we can work on maybe practicing in the dashboard itself. So hopefully you're in the right place and you came here for this. And so we'll go ahead and move forward to the next slide here. And so basically with the dashboard, what we really want to look at is it's an online tool, right? And it helps us to really look at how we're doing as K-12 schools. Uh, and I think they've simplified it a lot. Jewel and I were talking about that the other day, and some of the reports we use it frequently, so it's a little bit less foreign to us. But I think you'll find if you're just getting into the dashboard for the first time, that it is fairly easy to navigate, or easier now than it was. And again, the nice part is it's kind of looking at being one step in a series of changes that have tried to raise the bar for student learning, and thereby hopefully making greater outcomes for all students, right? And so keep that in mind as we go through. Even though some people look at it as a measuring stick, we're trying to look at it as more as a way to see how we're doing, compare with other schools, and make improvements for our students. So how does it work? Well, again, the goal is to help parents and educators to identify both strengths and areas of improvement on how we're doing. And that's both across both the state and local measures, which we'll talk about a little bit more in depth in a few minutes here. And then again, for state measures, performance is based on two factors. And so this is important. And I know this gets a little bit cumbersome. We were just talking about there will not be a CCI indicator report coming out for students at the end of this year because the juniors last year weren't counted because of lack of testing. And so, but in a normal year, what we do to calculate would we take our current year results and then look at whatever improvement or hopefully not lack of improvement from the previous year. So I am a recovering high school social studies teacher as well, and I think social studies teachers love their videos. And so we're going to show you about a video that goes about 90 seconds here that just gives you a brief introduction to the dashboard.
Welcome to the California School Dashboard. Around the dashboard in 90 seconds.
The dashboard is designed to help us understand how well our schools are doing and where improvement is needed. The best place to begin is by looking up your child's school. Right away, we see a variety of useful information called measures. Together, these give us a more complete picture of what's happening at the school. Once each year, all the information on the dashboard is updated. The state then assigns a color rating for each measure. These ratings are based on two main things: how well the school did at a certain point in time, and whether performance went up or down. If we look at one of the academic indicators, we see that overall, students fell 62.9 points below the standards for math, although they increased 14.3 points from last year. We can also see how students performed compared to the state average. And we can view a breakdown to see how well our schools served particular groups of students. Besides schools, we can view similar data about the district as a whole. The district section includes additional information about parent involvement and school climate and conditions. The dashboard puts clear information into our hands as parents, so we can talk with teachers and school leaders and help drive our schools to success. Are you ready to take it for a spin?
You can find more information about the California School Dashboard at www.casschooldashboard.org. This video was produced for the California Department of Education by Californians dedicated to Education Foundation.
All right. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of insight and a little bit of theme music for me going on there. Gives you a little bit more insight into the dashboard. We wanted to break it down a little bit to help you guys to see some of the different measures. And I want to start the slide off by saying, first of all, we're going to look at both the local measures and the 5-state or the 6-state indicators. But I think something that's really important to understand, especially as a counselor, is looking at the data that's put in to the computer is really put in by your school and district. And so we always preach the practice of clean data in, clean data out. And so however your student management system's set up, we really want people to be responsible in making sure putting in the right course codes, making sure courses are coded correctly for A through G, and making sure that they check those CalPADS reports to see if they're accurate. A lot of times schools will say, but Ross, I don't think this is accurate. And I would say, well, they're basing it on the data that you upload into CalPAD. So I just want to be clear about that the schools and the districts have a lot to do with these. And so looking at the 6 indicators here, we have college and career, we have academics, we have chronic absenteeism, graduation rate, English language progress, and then suspension rate. And so these 6 indicators are the ones that we take a look at. And obviously today we're going to focus on the college and career readiness one for and digging into that. However, the local indicators are still important. Basic conditions, parent engagement, access to broad course studies, implementation of academic standards, and school climate. And so those are all factors that also play a role in overall wellness of a school. But I want you to understand, as far as the dashboard goes, you're going to get a color on the 6 state indicators only, and not the 5 local. The local you're going to put met or did not meet. So just want to make sure with that. And again, we're going to focus in on the CCI component of these 6 indicators. as you could say, this is another way of looking at it. Here are those indicators. And we're also going to talk about specifically for this one, the college career readiness one. But you can see that if any of you have heard of differentiated assistance, right? If you're not meeting your measures consistently, then you could qualify for certainly differentiated assistance. And we would work with the county, or another support provider would work with you towards helping you meet those goals. So.
And if you're not familiar, differentiated assistance is one of the things that the state does to help schools who don't meet these different colors on these indicators to improve. So it's really about improving your processes and things like that. So for those of you who haven't been involved in the excitement that is differentiated assistance, that's a piece of the puzzle. And this all ties into your LCAP and many of the goals that you set at your district itself.
Indeed. And then just kind of a note before we move forward here, this slide here, the graduation rate indicator, it was an update that actually Jewel and I got when we were making the slide deck a couple weeks ago, is the update for 1920 is that there's a combined 4 and 5 year graduation rate will be used for comprehensive high schools. And so that's a change that came down the pike. And then also, again, as I stated, we got an email this morning from CDE that the CCI indicator will not be shown or be held for accountability sake on this year because of last year's juniors not being able to take the tests as normal. So with that, I'm going to send it over to Jewel and let her talk
Great.
about the grid.
Thanks so much, Ross. So just a couple more slides to clarify, because sometimes you'll see these big grids like this that tell you a little bit about your data. And what this means is that in order to determine what color your school is on any specific metric, what you'll see is you'll have a status. Like right now, this particular school's status is in medium. And so, but if you have that particular, maybe they have 70% of their students are meeting this status. Well, if you're at 70% of your students, there's a few different colors that you could get. If you've maintained from the last year, you keep being 70%, you're not doing any worse, you're not doing any better. In this case, you would be yellow right here. Let's say last year you were at 75 and now you're at 70. You've declined, right? You're doing worse than you were last year. They actually take that into account. And in that case, you might be in the orange section. In this particular case, even though they're at maybe 70%, that's an improvement by at least 1.5%. And so that puts you in green. And if you remember back to our last accountability model, where sometimes you were kind of stuck in a rut because it was really just about your status and what number you got on a big scale of all the things kind of combined. And so even when schools were making gains, you didn't see that reflected on our accountability model. But this accountability model really recognizes change and improvement. It's very improvement focused. And so the great thing is that as we do things like Ross was talking about, one of the first things people are doing is cleaning up their data. They look at it, what do you mean I don't have any kids with college credit? I have a ton of students who are going through that. So a lot of times it just takes us to step back and look at the procedures so that we can clean up our data. We see improvements and that moves us along on this scale. So it might look a little confusing when you're seeing grids like this, but what it really is taking into account up and down the side is like your current status, how many students are meeting that. And at the top, the middle column is like, you're kind of stagnant, you're doing the same thing as you move over to one side, it's really benefiting for improvements. And on the other side, if you're letting things slip, that you may get a lower color. And so each color grid is different for each one of the indicators. Sometimes you will see smaller grids. So if you have a smaller school, then they may not have a bigger the full 5x5 grid. And part of the reason is just because the data with a very small n value skews very quickly into significant decline or increases. So sometimes you'll just see a narrow one if you get into certain indicators. So, all right. Now, the thing is it's not just one color. So I want to take a moment and give you a chance to look at this. This is once you get into what the more equity reports in the dashboard, and we'll show you where to find these. But what do you notice here about this particular grid? Let's see, and feel free to put that in the chat. And you can find the slide deck. I'll put that in the chat again. And if you think that the just one color for, let's say, the CCI, let's say this is the CCI, and maybe you're at a school that does have a green indicator, you're not just going to get green. So I'm going to call on Ross, like he's a teacher here or a counselor here. Ross, what do you see here that might pull out that data? Anything that you notice or wonder?
Sorry, I was famously on mute. I seem to enjoy my mute button a lot, so I apologize about that. I tend to always look at from the top first, and so it seems to me when I'm looking at that, we have a kind of a interesting gap between one group being in that blue column, which is the highest, right? And a fair amount of students in the green. But when we look at yellow and orange, it's still too many people, right? And we're looking at our most vulnerable students sometimes because we've got students with disabilities, we've got foster youth, we've got homeless. And so we've got some traditionally underserved people that we'd really want to look at in this model. Now the other thing I would say that there are kids who are duplicated, right? So you can be African American and you can also be socioeconomically disadvantaged, or you could be white and homeless or foster. So something to keep in mind too.
Absolutely. And so as we get to this piece, that's right. So one of the things I think Megan mentions in the chat is a question about sample size. So the only time that we're going to have students in a color is if they have, I think it's 31 or more in that student group. So if we were to look at this, and maybe this seems like it's probably a fairly large school because we have at least 31 students of some of the smaller student groups like homeless or, certain other groups that might, or foster youth. A lot of times they might not get a color, but there's another place we'll show you where you can dive in a little bit deeper and see how many. This is one thing to just know is even if your school's in green, it doesn't mean that everything your school is doing is green. And so diving into this equity data is really important as we really approach the college and career indicator. The CCI is made of a ton of different components. So this is one of the documents that comes out from the state, but we're gonna show you something that looks a little bit simpler here because this can be a little bit overwhelming. But this is where you see all of the prepared measures, the approaching prepared and the not prepared. If we get into this, this is another one that comes from the state. And so these are kind of like your menu of possible things that can get you to prepared. So I look at it, I'm guessing most of you have been to Panera before, and Panera has a you pick two option. So it's like, oh, do you want a half of a sandwich and a soup, or a salad and a sandwich, whatever it is, right? Two things. More or less, the CCI prepared is kind of like a you pick two menu. There's a couple of things that have different rules, but if you have, let's say your A through G ready, then you also have to do one of these things below in order to meet the prepared level of the CCI. If you're a CTE pathway completer, you want to meet some of these to be ready for the CCI. So what we did to try to make it even easier, we have a flow chart for you. So right here, here's the flow chart. Here are all the ways that you can be ready. So you can have do really well on both SBAC exams, the Smarter Balance exams. You can do really well on two AP or IB exams. you can, and we're actually, let me not even go into these right now because we have a slide for each one. So what you can see here, this flow chart might help you understand how your students might meet that prepared. And so we'll talk through all of these, but then we're going to show you this crazy awesome, sometimes overwhelming part of the dashboard where it pulls all of these metrics out, and you can kind of dig in deep to see where your school is really meeting it and where you might be surprised that it needs a little bit of work to meet that more. So I'm going to pass this on to Ross to talk about a few of these measures right now. Ross?
All right, thank you. And so we're going to break down each one of the 8 different ways that was shown that you potentially could meet the CCI indicator. What we do want you to understand is there are multiple ways, and sometimes it does seem complex. And we also want to think about the implications for our leadership as counselors, right? When we're counseling and we're putting kids into classes and really looking at that, do we have this in the back of our mind? And do we know that this is something that we maybe want to encourage a child to take a certain class and work with them? So keep that just kind of at the forefront as we go through this. And it's really about knowing your students too and where they are with things. And so the first way to meet this is the Smarter Balanced Summative Assessment. And basically with that, it's a score of 3 or higher in both ELA and math. And so what I always like to think of, the first line of defense is making sure that your kids do well on the Smarter Balanced Assessment, right? And so again, this is something that sometimes is a little bit harder to motivate students for. And sometimes we find what ways might motivate them to do well on the test. Are there some things we can do to ensure that they give their best and set up a positive testing environment? So this is the most basic one. The second one, I'm sorry, no, you're good, Joel. You're good. So the second and third one, it's 2 and 3, but we combined them because this has to do with a population of your students who are taking both advanced placement and or IB classes, depending on your course of action. I came from a district that was very IB non-heavy. They were more AP heavy, right? And so as a result of that, we counted on that. But basically what we're looking at for this is that students score a 3 or higher on 2 AP exams or IB score of 4 or more on 2 IB exams, and only 1 exam at this level required if they're also A through G. So as Jewel was saying, this is like here's your soup and sandwich, right? Like you can't just have one. You got to buy the whole package if you want to meet the CCI indicator here. So keeping in mind that's one of the only ways you can do it without getting high scores on the SBAC or state testing. All right, and then 4 is our good old friend college credit. And so with college credit, we're really looking at academic or CTE, by the way. So it could be an academic-based class or it could be a college level class. Jewel and I always famously joke, I talk about my wife because she teaches a CTE class that is also a college level class. And so you have to have the grade of C- or better with 2 semesters or 3 quarters, and 1 semester or 2 quarters will be enough if combined with A through G or CTE completion. So again, there is always an and, right, involved with that. But again, the key is you'll see a lot of these are repeating. And so if a kid meets A through G, or if a kid meets a certain requirement, it may count to meet it in another way as well. So a little note on college credit that we want to make sure that you guys understand, because this question comes up a lot. Dual enrollment is now considered college credit. So so when we talk about it in CalPADS, they talk about dual enrollment and concurrent enrollment differently. Therefore, the dual enrollment name has been changed to college credit course to specify that. And both dual enrollment and concurrent enrollment courses are included in the CCI as long as student earns college credit upon completion of the course with C- or better. And I think we may have had something in the chat. Let's see here.
Yeah, Megan's asking, the semesters referring to high school semesters, is correct? Which I don't believe so. I think they get
No.
a semester of college credit. So, you know, just like an
Correct.
AP exam might get you 3 units, which is like a one semester. That in this case, it's a lot of times like a full year of high school will get a semester of college credit out of that. So that's um, what they're
Yeah.
looking at.
Megan, thank you, because that is an excellent question, right? And there's two things that I think we should talk about there, right? One is we need to know if where you're getting the credit from does use a quarter or a semester system, so we can give them appropriate. And two is sometimes students do this and don't even give us their transcripts. And so it's really important if they're taking outside classes to ensure that we get our transcripts from them, because then we can add them in. If not, it becomes a problem.
And
So
that's just something, just anecdotally, that's been playing out in Carlsbad is we have a ton of kids doing concurrent enrollment, but they never provide the transcripts, so we can't
Yeah.
report accurately to CalPADS. And so that's something we're working on, to have some intentional policies in place so we can get that reporting.
yeah.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think the next question actually also touches on that. So Allison
Mhm.
asks, some of our CTE capstone courses are articulated. So would that make a student prepared CTE completion plus articulated college credit from the capstone? So articulated courses, like the articulation itself, does not count for the CCI. They actually took that into consideration. They collected data and they recommended against that. If a student claims that credit, gets it on a college transcript, and then transfers it, that's when it works. The only way this works is that it's transcripted college credit that is transferred back to the high school. And then, like when you put it, and this is, I think, in the counselor realm, when you put it on the transcript, you can't just say that it replaced the high school biology class, because now it won't roll up as a college class. It actually needs to be placed in and tagged as a college course, because you know nobody at the state's going to hear you say, well, that's because it's college credit, right? So it has to be tagged in your SIS as college credit in order for it to count, which is one of the places we see districts cleaning up some of those processes.
Yeah, and Allison, I really appreciate the question, because I think it helped a lot. The other piece I would say too, not just for Allison, but anybody, is it's really important to know how your registrar is actually coding these courses and putting them in, right? And so I would always say that whoever your person who's managing your CalPADS or your data management or your course catalog and so forth needs to really be aware of these. So please go back, counselors, go back and talk to your registrar, whoever inputs this information, and say, hey, look, I just went to the CCI presentation, and this guy Ross and this gal Jules, they said some crazy stuff. I just want to check, right? You'd be surprised what you might find. I'm going to tell you, when the A through G thing went down, just by awareness alone and some cleaning up of courses and some and some conscientious scheduling, we raised it 30% in 3 years, right? And so I think CCI indicators can be done raised with some of this intentionality as well. So excellent questions. Thank you for that. And then the other piece that I don't know if some of you went to our Seal of Biliteracy. Our partners put on a session yesterday on the Seal of Biliteracy. But the state Seal of Biliteracy is another way students can meet proficiency. But they have to be proficient in reading and writing in at least one or more languages, in addition to ELA, to the English, and score 3 or higher in ELA on the SBAC. And so again, this has to show dual proficiency in that. And so you still have to show that you can pass the English language arts test when it comes to the SBAC, as well as show proficiency. On the next slide, there's some ways we can show you how you can meet that proficiency. And so this is a question that comes up a lot. Well, Ross, how do you show proficiency? And the way you can do the second language proficiency is through passing an AP exam, either through the or IB exam, or you can also have the as well as the ACT test. However, again, you have to have the English proficiency on the SBAC still, right? And so and again, there's some resources here that we put in here. These links are hot. So Jewel did share this with you, the poster, but you can click on these links and it'll give you kind of a poster and link to the CDE website on ways to do this. If you're at a school like many of us are, that has a high population of students who are native Spanish speakers, This is a great way for your students to reach CCI proficiency. This is one of the areas, again, that when schools really make a conscientious effort, they can really boost their numbers when it comes to CCI passing. So was there something in the chat, Jewel, that we should look at now, or?
There is, and I think it does harken back to the college credit course.
Okay.
And Lou was asking, a concern is that if the articulated course was completed as a high school course with a letter grade, then it is used as such for A through G. Then if the student claims a college credit and reports it back as a college course with the credit earned by exam, it gets messy according to the UC and CSU.
It does.
So I don't know the best practices on that. I know that there was some comments made about them not also, like, even though right now there's maybe a double dip loophole for students to be a pathway completer and then also have their capstone counted as a college credit. But I think that was part of articulation. They were like, well, you've already gotten dashboard credit for this piece. So I don't know if they've addressed this or if they will, because it does give students kind of a loophole. If they do an articulated CTE course, they get in. I think San Diego Unified, I wonder if they have some best practices, because they, in our region, far and above every other district. Most districts have less than 10% of their students meeting the prepared metric using college credit courses. San Diego Unified is over 40%. But part of that is incentivizing students to transcript it, because they have a board policy that says that if you have college credit courses, they count as a 5-point A, just like an honors course. And so they've created internal incentives for students to transcript those credits, which we don't see in a lot of other areas. So, I think that's a great comment, Lou. And I think that's something that we can keep an ear out as our CCI team continues our work. So thank you for that.
Yeah. So one more comment on the state seal of biliteracy. The one area also that you can show proficiency on as well that is if a student completes a 4-year high school course of study with a 3.0 in foreign language, right? And so a lot of times we have kids who take 3 years of a foreign language and are almost getting fluent. It's a shame if we don't encourage them to take that 4th year, because that would probably be an easy way for them to meet that indicator and get the state seal of biliteracy. So just being mindful of those things. Again, counseling practices, I would say maybe something that you would want to look at and highlight is, did this student as a junior complete 3 years of a foreign language? Did they take the AP Spanish language exam, right? Or IB Spanish. So just keep that in mind. And I think there's another question from Lou here. Let me take a look real quick. Do they need literally 4 years, or can they just take 3 and 4 without actually taking 1 and 2? I think for the actual seal of biliteracy, you do need to take all 4. I do know that a lot of schools are having Spanish for Spanish speakers and advanced, but I would say that if that be the case, then I would encourage them to take the subject area test of the SAT or ACT, which would meet the needs as well. So
yeah, you can waive that course requirement by passing the assessment. So I think for those students who are already proficient, that's probably the best way to go.
Oh, if you do have questions, we can leave you a link for Ava, who is our person on our CCI team who specifically deals with the state seal of biliteracy. So let us know if you need any resources for that, and we can send it your way.
Absolutely. And just as we go into the next one, the seal of biliteracy and JROTC are really site specific and district specific. So a district adopts that they are going to offer the state seal of biliteracy. So right now, if your district's not doing it, it's not like you can just start giving it out if people meet these requirements. And so it becomes something that you can champion with your district to make sure that these are in place. And there are great award ceremonies and things like that every year that happen in the region. So if you're not currently seeing students who are earning this state seal, I encourage you to look into how you can incorporate that into your district and site. And then military JROTC leadership science. This is another metric that not every school has. It just depends on whether you have that program. But students who complete at least 2 years of that program and score a 3 or higher on ELA or math and a level 2 in the other will meet prepared in that metric. And this is just a little bit more about the JROTC requirements. This means that students are participating. If they do finish 4 years of JROTC, it doesn't automatically qualify them to join the military, but they still have to take the ASVAB and meet academic eligibility. Also, JROTC does allow students to have an advanced rank if they enlist. So there are some great benefits of those programs, and that's why it's one of the metrics for our CCI.
Great scholarships too for
yeah.
ROTC.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And then CTE pathway completion, which is near and dear to my heart since I work primarily with CTE programs. Students who are part of a CTE pathway complete 300 hours in that pathway. So that's 2 full years of courses. And they have to have a grade of C- or better. And so that's kind of in that you pick 2 model. If they're a pathway completer, they also need to either do well in the SBAC, they need to get college credit, or they need to meet the A through G requirements. This is a place where counseling is a huge piece of the puzzle to make sure our students have room in their schedule to complete the pathway. They have to have the intro and the capstone course, and also to be A through G. So if you have students who do that, just on scheduling alone, they're going to meet the prepared indicator. And so that is actually one of the ideal ways to ensure our students have the high school experience, is to hit both CTE and A through G with their program of study. Now, if CTE is a mystery to you, look no further, because this afternoon at 1 o'clock, I will be doing a full presentation along with Emily from Poway, who is a CTE specific counselor, just on helping to decode CTE, and you can jump in there and get a better feel for what the heck is CTE? What are those people doing in that random lab at the back of the school? Some really amazing work is the answer there. So hope to, if you're interested in what we're doing in CTE, come to that session this afternoon. And finally, A through G, which has been a huge way to get our students really boosted up with their rigor in schools over the last 5-10 years, as we've really pushed A through G. And now this being, when you think of the UPIC 2, this is the metric that meets the most student need. And what we see is this is really one of the top metrics that we see students meeting in order to be prepared. So here, if you meet your A through G requirements, then your menu is that you can also do CTE pathway, SBAC, college credit, or AP. So many ways to meet that A through G, or meet prepared using A through G. So this is definitely something, as counselors, you are huge instruments in making the schedules fit for our students. And so as they are looking to be prepared, this is definitely a huge metric.
And I also want to just add with this, Jewel, that, the A through G piece is kind of the crown jewel in this piece, because when you look at it, when we talk about equity, our goal should have all of our students, again, meeting those A through G requirements. So no matter what, they have the ability to go to college, whether they choose to or not, again, should be their decision coupled with their family's needs. But I always want to encourage people to really look at, what are we doing to improve our A through G? Because that's going to drive whether students in most cases are going to be eligible to meet the CCI indicator.
Absolutely. I always say I want our students to leave being able to make informed decisions about their future and have the academic background so that all of those options are open to them. And so A through G does that. And I know even, a lot of times there are some great programs at the community college. It doesn't mean that A through G isn't the right way to prepare our students for them. No matter what our students' post-secondary choice is, A through G is the foundation that prepares them to be successful. All right. So let's get into the meat and potatoes of the dashboard. And so what we are going to do is we're going to pop onto the dashboard, and I would encourage you to also open up your dashboard. And what you'll see, first of all, at the same time, there's a little worksheet, and this is going to ask you to make a copy. And now you have kind of the questions that I'm about to run through with Ross right in front of you, because what we'd like to encourage you to do, and it will automatically force you to make a copy, so you'll have to be in your Google Drive, but what it will get you to do is kind of go through this exercise that we're going to go through and encourage you to do this for your own school. So I'm going to pull this off to the side and kind of come back here. So this is the dashboard website, and so it kind of gives you the overview, so if you forget things or you want to see the overall of the state, but most of the time you're going to just go in here, and what we're going to do is we picked a school outside of our county, so none of you feel picked on. Hopefully none of you are from Cypress High School up in Anaheim, because that's who we picked. Either that or maybe you are, and then you'll go, oh, I know what I'm doing here. Now, they did release a dashboard in 2020. It has not a lot of things on it. So what I encourage you to do right here is actually click to 2019, because that is the last full dashboard release that will have the level of detail. So the link to make a copy is on this page down here in this worksheet, and let me copy the link and give this to everyone. Worksheet. There you go. And you'll see in that little, this is a trick in Google that's kind of like, I don't know, apparently I always align things to menu. It's like the secret menu at In-N-Out. It's like if you change the end of your Google URL from edit to copy, and so you can see that in the chat, then anytime someone clicks on it, it automatically makes them make a copy. And so that's a nice way to share it with people so that they can kind of fill it out along the way. All right. So any other questions? Okay, so we're here and we are at Cypress High School, and we're here with Ross, who is a counselor at Cypress High. And so Ross, if we're looking at this page, what color would you say your school is for the CCI?
So looks like we're at solid green. Woohoo!
Woohoo! Way to
like
go!
My shirt. I wore the right shirt today.
Yeah. All right.
Go Ducks.
And so if I click on this, that's going to take us down on the same page. It kind of scrolls you down to what we call kind of like the baseball card. And you can see that little baseball card has some stats on it. So if we get into here, then Ross, what % of your students are considered prepared on the CCI based on this right here?
I'm sorry, I'm already on the wrong thing here. I apologize. So
no, you could do. I'm navigating. You get to just watch mine. Everybody else has to click on their own.
So college and career, we're at 69.4% prepared, and I'll just say that.
And how much have you increased? Have you decreased? What's your change?
So I see that arrow's up, so we're up 3.5%.
Perfect. So if you look right here, so this is our status and our change right next to each other, right? We have our 69.4% prepared, and then we've increased by 3.5. Now, if we look down, we see this equity report, and we can see not all students are at 69.4% prepared. So what we're going to do is now we're going to view more details. So let me refresh from the beginning for those of you who are hopefully pulling up your own dashboard and following us. Okay, we started right here. We actually started, if we open the dashboard, we're going to put our school in this little Cypress High. You can put in the city or county if you want, but if you're a unique school name, it'll bring that up. And we want the 2019 dashboard because 2020 was not a very thorough dashboard. When you get this up, you might see more than one. Let's say you're at Grossmont High, at Grossmont High School District. The code that has a bunch of zeros at the end, that's going to be your whole district. So you'll want to click on the one that has a bunch of numbers and not just zeros, if that helps. You get into your dashboard. Ross has found that they're green in college and career. I click on it. It's going to take me down to what we call kind of the baseball card that has all the stats. But this is not enough. We want more than just the baseball card of information. So now I'm going to click view more details. And it's nice because then it goes to the detail page and it zooms you all the way to the college and career portion. So if I look here, Ross, what subgroup is your lowest on the CCI?
So it looks like the group that's yellow is students with disability. So those are the group that right now is the lowest.
Yeah, so we might be really thoughtful about how we can ensure students with disabilities are meeting their A through G, are meeting maybe CTE pathway, how we're supporting them to do well on more of the SBAC exams or to take JROTC, right? So this is one of the ways that we start thinking about how do we really look at a subpopulation and ensure that they're improving along the way. But and in general, this school is actually doing quite well. Most schools, many will see some in red, some will see some in orange. Great. And then we'll show you what happens when it's less than 30. That's a great question. The no performance color are the students that are less than 31, but we'll click on those in a second and we'll get a closer look. Let's go ahead. Actually, if we go down here, so there's no performance color. If you scroll down just a little bit, now we can click and we know that those students with disabilities, they're only 27.9% prepared. But check this out, an increase of 9%. And that's where they get the yellow. So this is a pretty low status, right? Less than 30, but they are doing a lot of work to increase those student scores. And so that's one of the reasons they're in yellow. We can see there are 61 students with disabilities in this. And remember, the CCI is a metric of your graduating class. This is not all 4 years of your students. This is your graduating class, and it goes back with 4 years of their experiences. And so you'd had 61 in the students with disabilities in that graduating class of 2019.
So that's significant. 9% have increased, right? A 9% increase to only 61 students, right?
Yeah, yeah. So they've done a lot to ensure those students are improving. Now, if you click on no performance color, this is where we get into some more detail. If it is higher than 11 students, you will still see the status and change. So we can say they don't have a very large African-American population, only 17 African-American students in that cohort. But we can also see, wow, only 17.6 of them were prepared. So we may want to ensure that we're having additional supports for African-American students in the school. But wow, that decline is huge. Now, one of the reasons we don't give a color is because this could be due to just a couple of students, maybe in the last class being really strong and then this class being really weak. The lower N value or denominator really means that any changes in our students has a huge impact on those status and change. But this would be a red flag for me if I was working with a school of, we want to make sure that we have our eyes on that. The foster youth, they only have 2 foster youth students. So we can't put that data on the dashboard or everyone in the state will go like, hey, I know Josie is a foster youth student at Cypress High, so she must have these kinds of results on the test, right? It's just too personal. So anything under 11, data is not displayed because that actually may violate student privacy, right? If you had one Pacific Islander group and you put their data on the dashboard, you could just know what one particular student had, and that's not okay. So you can get a lot deeper into that data here. All right. So now we have gotten in, and what you can also see is the percent of students are going to be on this page as well of who are prepared. So mostly prepared, approaching prepared, not prepared. Approaching prepared, a lot of times is like you pick one of the Panera, you're only having that little half sandwich or the soup, but you're not meeting both. And it varies by indicator. It's not as in-depth. Now, how do you know what the thing is that students are doing to meet this criteria? Well, it's not in this nice, fancy, beautiful space. It's up here at the top under View Additional Reports. So get ready. We're going to click and we're going to go, and it's like a whole nother page that's back on the CDE website. So I'm going to go down here. It's going to bring up that, as long as you click it from that school, it'll bring you to that page for that school. And here there's all kinds of great reports. So we could look at the college and career 5x5, and it will tell us where every student is on that 5x5. It's super awesome. But we're actually going to go to the college and career measures report. Okay, so it's this one right here, college and career measures. So again, to get there, I'm going to go back at the top of your dashboard. There's a view additional reports button. It's going to bring you over to the CDE website. Scroll down and click the college career measures report, and be not afraid of the mini data tables you are about to find, because they are full of awesome data. Oh, I'm such a nerd, and it's great. All right, so what I can see here is so many numbers. So I had 690 students in my graduating class, or in this cohort that we're looking at here. I can see 69.4% are prepared, 13.9% are approaching prepared, and 16.7%, man, they didn't even show up. They didn't order anything off the menu. They're sitting over here having like a cup of water. They did not drink from the well of education, right? So this is these are our students that we have, and then it is going to disaggregate into our student groups here. And again, you can see that groups that are under 11, we're not going to display their data because that would be a privacy breach. I'm going to scroll down. We get more data about how many students are prepared. Lovely graphs that show us how many of our students met that. But here is where some of the gold is. So Ross, if you look at this, what do you notice like jumps out at you right away?
So I always look for the good first. So I'm looking for I look at the polarities, right? So I'm looking for the dark squares, the darker reddish brick color brown.
Great, because if we look at the legend at the top, we know the darker the color, the better that we're doing in that metric.
And then I also go to the polarities, right? So then I'm also looking at the areas that are the lightest color, that kind of tan color. And I look at some of the areas that I'm like, okay, so 12.3%, only 4.2% college credit, right? So that's maybe something I want to think about when I look at that. IB, they probably don't have an IB program there, right? And it looks like no military science, so no ROTC as well. So I look at what the locus of control is, and it looks like college credit and CTE are two areas that certainly could use some improvement when it comes to that. And then when I look at the groups themselves, again, I look for the dark colors, and then I look for the polarities there as well.
So where are we doing the best? What metrics are our students meeting prepared the most often from?
So we got a pretty high A through G rate there at almost 90%, right? So that's pretty good.
Nice. And the cool thing is that is across all of our student groups, consistently all the student groups that are being reported are in that higher L4 tier, level 4 prepared. So well done, Cypress High, on your A through G completion. Those counselors know what they're doing. Where else do we see some high spots?
So it looks like in the Smarter Balanced assessment, it looks like we've got a lot of orange and brown. So not too bad there.
Mm-hmm.
The state seal by literacy, we're looking at like 48%. So I would say that's pretty high compared to others in the state. So I would be pleased with that. So I'm sorry, my equity feelers are going off, going, uh-oh, like red flag. Where's where's some of the other things? So, and I'll leave that for a discussion in a minute, though.
Yeah. Well, and we only have 5 minutes, we know, left on this talk. But one thing that I would encourage you, hopefully you've kind of navigated yourself to this page, or if you didn't, then your homework is please do that so that you start seeing these trends. Even though we're not going to have a dashboard release this fall, and even though we're not really sure how COVID is going to overall impact our students' dashboard, these metrics are not just about our brownie points with the state, they're about the student experience. And we want them to have a full menu of these experiences. So like I look at this and I'm like, I wonder why our Hispanic, white, and English learners and students with disabilities are not similarly status as our other students in advanced placement. It used to be that we got all the brownie points for just forcing kids into taking the test.
Yeah.
This data actually comes from the College Board, and it's about students who passed the test. And so we do want to make sure we're supporting all students, but also that we're equitably putting them into these classes.
And I would say, Jewel and I, with our CCI team, we went over these, and when I know some people are not compelled by data, but I think having the data side by side like this will show equity gaps, right? I think sometimes you look at colors and, on the actual where the needle is on the dashboard, and that's one thing. But when you actually see these lined up next to each other, I think that the gaps become very, very clear very quickly.
Yeah, absolutely. So we wanted to introduce you to this. If you scroll down, you'll see the other ones that are prepared, and you'll see there are fewer metrics that are part of the prepared. So that's another place to explore. I like to look at this and go, well, 18 kids completed a CTE pathway and they didn't pick a second thing. How can we make sure our CTE kids are all getting the A through G, or some other form of movement towards being prepared? So I think we had 41 kids who were A through G, but they didn't do any of these other things, right? So sometimes looking at the approach and prepared is a great place to see where little tweaks to your system may push some students over the edge. So we wanted to kind of demystify this because it looks scary when you get into it, but as soon as you dive a little deeper, it's just great information.
Angela, I also want to say this is a great way for you also as a counselor, or if you work for an AP who's in charge of counseling or anything else, to say, this data does not seem right at all. Right. And so it's a good way to check yourself too, and your school, to see that are we putting clean data in here? Are these classes coded correctly, and so forth? So I just want to caution you on that. If they don't seem right, then maybe it's time to investigate a little bit.
Absolutely. All right. So we aren't going to take time for this discussion, but I think these are great to bring back. And when you have a counselor meeting, go bring that worksheet, have everyone fill it out and engage in these questions. This is a great way to start the conversation at your site and be really thoughtful about how you can impact change. And the worksheet, just so everyone knows, Tanya and I presented on this at the counselor conference in December, the community college one. And so Tanya put that together. So, this week she is slammed and can't be part of the presentations, but I have to give her props for that worksheet. I think that's great. Our team is working on providing more resources for the CCI. We are starting to create some little videos about parts of the CCI. But as we were creating them, we realized that one of our flyers was a little out of date. So we'll be updating these in the next few months with the hope that this would be a way for you to better understand the CCI and have some tools. Also, you are always trying to come up with ways to communicate with parents and students. We know that you are on the front lines of those community engagement kind of pieces oftentimes. I wanted to make sure that you knew that the CDE does provide tools to engage parents, but it's weirdly embedded on their website. So if you go to their website, there's all these little tabs in it, and then you click on that, and here's a number of parent resources that you might embed into your communications with parents when it comes to the dashboard. So thank you for joining us today. Feel free to reach out if you have any questions. If your school is looking for more, like, hey, we want as a district to have somebody come talk to us about the CCI. If you're in San Diego County, that's something that we could definitely do. And this has been recorded. So we will turn that into Tanya, and you should all have access to that in the archives.
Thank you, everybody. Again, Jewel and I sit on the county level college career indicator task force team. And so again, we're looking for some lines of service to maybe provide to your districts and schools. So please reach out when needed. And it's an absolute pleasure to have you guys with us today.
All right. Well, I think it might be time for chair yoga or whatever comes next in the conference. So we'll stick around for a second. I'll stop the recording, but thank you all for joining us today, and hope you have a fantastic rest of your conference. And one more commercial, I'll be talking about CTE at 1 o'clock.